There are exercises that I will almost never go under 10. So if you think about your lateral raises, think about your bicep curls, think the most important mindset shift that every person needs to make when you're really committing to a long-term goal and you want to be a healthy individual is to start seeing this journey as an infinite journey, meaning there's no way to win at living a healthy lifestyle. When influencers make videos on the internet about how they train, this is a major factor needs to be considered. Like if you're watching other people's content and they're saying, this is what I'm doing now, well, man, like what built their physique?
All right, so I'm going to kick things off talking about hypertrophy. You've mentioned that you like to train with a variety of rep ranges. And in the past, your preference was to work mostly in the 6 to 12 rep range. So can you advise if that's still the case and how you decide when to use different rep ranges in as much detail as possible?
Yeah, this is a really good question because when people hear something like that, 6 to 12 recommendations, that's the first very broad range. So you can kind of go in different directions with it. It also heavily depends on which exercise is that applied to. There are exercises that I will almost never go under 10. So if you think about your lateral raises, think about your bicep curls, think about your standard isolation stuff. Very rarely am I go, let's say, under 10 reps where failure is probably going to be somewhere between like around 12 to 15, sometimes even up to 20, depending on the exercise itself. And because some of these exercises are not very practical to load very heavy. So if I am undulating my lateral raise, I might have a block of training that's going to be maybe 4 months in the 15 to 20 range, and I'm going to try to drop it a little bit more and intensified, go down to 12 to 15. I might get close to 10, but it's very rare, again, that I'm going to push that lateral raise to be very heavy. It might be just 1 week, or if my reps drop because I went too close to failure or whatnot in the first set, I really kind of gassed out and then I dropped down. So in general, it depends on the exercise. So that's like the first criteria that I have, because certain exercises are more suited to lower rep ranges. Some exercises are more suited to higher rep ranges. So I wouldn't want my Romanian deadlift, let's say, to be in sets of like 12 to 15, because I feel like my back will give out somewhere halfway there. And it's just not going to be an exercise that, based on my history, where I did have certain things with my back, I kind of felt tweaks. I felt things not being as stable at those rep ranges. I'm listening to my body, and I'm sort of working that RDL mostly in the 6 to 10 range. Around 8, I would say, is my average. My squat also, I'd prefer to work around sets of 8, no more than 10 as well. Again, it's just more of the back stability issue as the set progresses and lasts very long. Now, obviously, you can, a hack squat or leg press, those I can push higher because those remove the limit factor of the back, so I can get higher. So the way I like to kind of conceptualize my own training is just in periods. Like, what am I doing for this particular period of time? And then I'm gradually throughout the year moving between higher to slightly lower reps, and I'm returning back up to higher. So there's sort of this wave formation across the year. And a lot of it is sometimes just based on what I feel inspired to do, honestly. Like, I mean, there's no like hard science that will actually tell you exactly, okay, you got to structure it in these particular blocks. But there are certain times when I just want to see how far, how strong have I gotten. And it's really hard to see that if you're working only like sets of 10 to 15. So I like to push myself in those blocks, maybe take one block of sets of 6 on the RDL, really see, can I break my limit, which currently is about 200 kg or so? Am I more comfortable with 200? Can I get 7 or 8 reps with that 200, maybe at lower RPs? But then I'm going to primarily do my own training at about sets of 8 around there for those heavy compound lifts. And then the isolations ones will be a bit higher. But it just undulates throughout the year. And I think that's sort of more of an intuitive choice of mine, even before I've gone a bit more into the literature and see how other people end up doing it, just simply because I've noticed if I push too heavy too often, I'm going to have joint problems. I just accumulate a lot more joint issues over time. And then if I have this undulating process, then I'm able to kind of hit it hard for a block, maybe for 4 to 6 months. I'm going to go really hard. And then I'm going to spend the next, 8 to 12 months where it's just going to be slightly higher repetitions, and I'm going to go back to it and intensify. I even had in the last 3 years, I've had a block of training where I've gone like actually very low rep. And man, it was really hard to sustain it longer than 2-3 months. Like I felt like, especially in my chest, I felt like my strength has gone dramatically higher because of it, so doing sets of 5 and 3. But after 3 months or so, like 2 to 3 months, I just couldn't sustain. I was starting to have all kinds of problems. Bursitis on my right elbow. My chest was permanently sore. And it's not a high volume program that I'm running. So I was starting to run into issues. I had a guy come over, do like specific PT, like a person that I knew was really good, and he only kind of does visits and stuff, working on this particular tendon here that connects. And this was really insanely sore. This was sore. Even if I would take like 5 days off training, it would still be sore. It would never go away. So I was really starting to like get worried. Because if you tear something and if you get an injury, you're basically out of the game. So I had to back off, and then I went back up to sets of 10, sets of 12, sets of 15 even, and then just sort of rebuilt. And now I'm really cautious with not going under 6. So even if I'm training in the gym, I might practice singles like for a period, let's say 3 months out of the year. Like last 6 months, I actually practiced a lot of singles just to try it out. Those are RP like 8.5, something I could do probably sets of 3 with. I'll just do one, and I'm going to move on to my rep work. So I still want to kind of remind myself of that I can lift heavier. Like I'll still give a signal like I can, but I'm not going to train in those rep ranges that are low, even though I would love to. I think I prefer that style of training because I kind of, over the years, I've become very fond of power building, and my programming was very influenced by power building. So I was doing many years just sets of 6 to 8, and I was just doing at everything. Like very rarely I would go over 10. And as you're younger, I mean, I could have gotten away with it because when I was in my late 20s, I'm like 27, 26, 27, I can really push hard. And you're also not as strong. When you're benching, like 100, I mean, you can get away with, a lot of stuff when you're benching 100, or let's say 80, right? Like you can do a lot. Like you can do many sets, you can do all kinds of stuff. But when you start getting your bench to 3 plates and you're starting to kind of scratch the surface of like 3.5 plates, it's just something that I felt like there's almost like a non-linear increase in how much tissue, connective tissue issues you start incurring. And then you kind of have to think, is this really worth it? Because I want to lift for a long time. I just saw a picture of Jeff Alberts comparing himself at 38 and 58. I'm 30 and 38, and he's amazing, man. And I'm 30 and 38 in what is it now? In 3 days. And I'm kind of thinking, like, if I continue doing certain things that I used to do, I'm not going to maintain that consistency and that health to be able to lift at 58, which I really want to, and I want to keep improving. So yes, a lot of these decisions kind of come in through a kind of like a periodization model over the course of a year. But it's a lot of personal preference. I think that's something that we also have to consider. What you enjoy training with, what do you find kind of interesting? So yeah. And plus exercise rotation, all that type of stuff to avoid connective tissue issues. So
awesome. I'm going to throw out just a couple of points here, and I'm just curious if any of these impact how you think about rep ranges. Maybe the volume you do, the frequency of the exercise, and the proximity to failure. Do any of those impact how you think about what rep range you're choosing for that exercise?
Yeah. So one caveat here is I like to take my sets much closer to failure than I would say the evidence-based crowd would currently say it's even advisable. It's just the way I found my own training to be very effective and to see progress. I didn't really see a lot of progress if I were to try to stay at, let's say, RP 7-ish, maybe sometimes 7.5. I tend to lean more into RPs like 8.5 on average, 9. A lot of isolations will be basically taken to failure in the last set. Even compound lifts will be, sets of 8 RP would be like the standard. Like that's kind of like normal for me. But mostly I would be trying to go a bit higher. I still try to keep 1 rep in the tank, but I definitely don't really train a lot to keep 2-3 reps in the tank. And this is just the way I like to train. And then the obvious downside of that is that I have to consider how much volume am I going to do at these higher RPs. So then I have to also consider how much time I have to spend in the gym, where I could probably drop the RP, do more sets, not necessarily that I would enjoy that type of training. But let's say if I had more time in the gym, I could do that. But currently, we have a second child in the way, and there's just a lot of stuff that's going on. I just really can't afford myself to spend more than an hour in the gym. And when you're an advanced lifter and you have only an hour is not a lot of time. I go in there, I warm up. By the time I warm up, I'm I'm basically having to, squeeze my isolation lifts to like maybe 20 minutes and get it all done, because by the time I'm done with my compounds, like the workout is almost over. So that is definitely considered. Frequency wise, I also changed certain things. I used to be able to bench, 3 times a week. I was definitely improving very fast my bench. Now I'm benching only once a week, and that's the max I can with the current weights that I'm doing. So I think the preference kind of goes into the proximity of failure. It goes into the frequency and total volume. Like my volume currently is no more than 10 sets per body part per week. So I really don't do more than that. So I'm actually on a very low end, like almost on the lowest end of the recommendation for someone who would be lifting for, let's say, now I'm almost come to 15 years of lifting. The thing is, I'm still progressing, right? So it's kind of like that thing, like progress is still happening. Will I eventually have to change my approach to try to maybe go slightly higher volume, maybe try to lower the rest periods, to try to limit the load I'm using, to try to get to those RPs a little bit sooner in some other artificial way? Probably, right? So I'm trying to delay that as much as I can, because I really enjoy training this way. So I'm trying to sort of survive for as long as I can with this before I have to change to a more, I guess, traditional keep 2-3 reps in a tank. What currently is what I'd say most people recommend. So yeah, unfortunately, I really like to train hard, and I think that's probably like my biggest downfall, that I'm leaning more into overtraining more often than not, especially with limited sleep and a lot of other stress in life. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you were just mentioning Jeff Alberts, and he trains with very low volumes and very high intensity, and he's been able to do it for quite some time, and it works. So I think the advantage in working with less volume is that you need to make sure that every set counts. And then you also know that if you're not progressing, it's not because you're like not getting enough recovery, right? Because if you're training 3 times a week, a certain body part with high volume, and that third session is a poor session, you can say, oh, well, I was under recovered. But if you're doing it either with less frequency or less volume, like recovery is not, it's not the variable on why you're not progressing if you're not.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I train 4 days a week, so it's a typical kind of like currently an upper lower split, which I found very enjoyable. And I'll squat once a week, I'll RDL once a week, and I'll bench once a week. And the rest that I'm doing for those major body parts will be other compound lifts. I'm going to try to put in some of the, like leg presses. I'm going to try to do some hack squats. I'm going to try to do other variations of that, because I found that variation also helps me recover a bit quicker, and I'm not feeling as much of a strain. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jeff is a great example of this, of being able to push himself and train with really heavy loads as well, for what I'm seeing, at least from the training footage. And I hope that I have the same capacity to train as much for as long as he did. And he has also improved as well over time, which is incredible to see. So yeah, like I've tried. I mean, again, one thing when we were talking about fitness advice and training advice, that I'm telling you what I'm doing now. Throughout 15 years, I've tried literally everything. So I've gone like from
you've done the full body every day. I know you've done everything.
Yeah, like I've done like every possible permutation of like different types of training styles you could find on Google, starting with stupid bodybuilding.com routines that I just kind of start off with, different bro splits that I started off with, programs that were like full body every day, full body 3 days per week, starting strength. Strong, there was like this strong 5x5, strong lifts 5x5. I've done that. I've done squat every day program, which actually resulted in an knee injury. I've done what else did I do? I did German volume training style training, which was more kind of like a blend of that and Vince Gironda's like 8x8 approach. And again, I could get away with a lot of like random stuff when I was an intermediate lifter. You can just like throw stuff at you and just see what kind of works and what doesn't, and just through some basic analysis, see what's going on. But then obviously like past 2015 and then 2020, and then now we're 2025, time flies. We got a lot more evidence of what might work, what might not work. And my lifestyle has changed as well quite a lot. So I have to accommodate for that. So I'm trying to really min-max my own situation right now with what I'm doing. So if someone is like a young person kind of coming into lifting, I wouldn't really advise like, I would really actually advise trying a lot of different things. Don't just do what I'm saying I'm doing right now. Really try a lot of different things, because you don't necessarily know what you're going to respond to at that moment in time. I mean, I see with clients, like I would honestly, like maybe 1 out of 100 clients will run into the same situation as I am, so they need to train as the way I do. Like it's just very kind of like a very niche thing, because how many people will actually live for 15 years and try a lot of different things and find out what works for them? It's a very small like percentage, and even the research out there is kind of more geared toward, I guess, the intermediates and more like the beginners. So I wouldn't necessarily advise even, and I think when influencers make videos on the internet about how they train, this is a major factor that needs to be considered. Like if you're watching other people's content and they're saying, this is what I'm doing now, well, man, like what built their physique, right? What was the training process and what they have done to get to the level that they've had the current physique? Maybe they've improved the physique at the moment, maybe a few percentage, but the big, like 80% of their gains probably came from something else. So it's always about that. I think it's really important to try different approaches, whether it's higher intensity, lower intensity, more volume, because all these variables are kind of unique to your genetic makeup and what you can respond to. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that sort of discovery process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to move on to a different topic here. So one of my favorite videos you did, it's actually an older video. It has to do with talking about long-term results. You actually give this example, this guy named Joe who lost 35 pounds, but he still isn't happy with his physique. And the reason you say that is he's comparing his progress with his end point and not his starting point. So what happens is he starts getting discouraged and start to doubt things. And then things start slowly sliding back into old habits, and he puts the weight back on. I think this is actually a very common situation that happens. So how can people break out of this kind of negative cycle that happens?
Yeah, and this is actually one of my core pillars of what I really try to do a lot in my coaching and also with videos as well. Try to convey to people that again, you're never going to reach your perfect outcome. Like your perfect outcome is going to keep moving as you get better. So my ideal physique that I had when I started lifting was maybe my own physique 5 years ago. When I got to that physique, now my bar has moved higher and higher and higher. And today the bar has moved even higher. So I know that I'm moving the bar. So if I try to be, okay, if I base my happiness on that bar, it's never enough. There's always a gap, essentially. So you can think of it as a problem of a gap. Okay, how much am I not getting yet, or how am I missing out on, or how much have I accomplished already, which is comparison to the starting point. So I think that is something that's very overlooked in the fitness world, because people are often underestimating the power of just general motivation and just general, I guess, enjoyment of the process. That's not often talked about. Celebrating small wins, really appreciating the journey, maturing with the journey of being a lifter, kind of falling in love with the process. It's not like this, it's kind of, when you start a new relationship, it's all like romantic, it's all fun and nice, and it's everybody's excited, kind of the honeymoon period. But lifting long-term looks more like that, marriage of 30, 40 years of someone just like, whatever, let's just do it. It's the conversations are very like, you just are so familiar with the person, you're so comfortable with the person, you're appreciating the person on a much deeper level. You have these layers of gratitude for it. And that's what the journey ultimately has to look like if you want to maximize your results. Because if you're consistently in the kind of gap mindset, I still have this much to lose, I still have this much muscle to gain. This guy's benching 225 and I still am benching 185, or I'm 225. This guy's doing 245 in the gym and I want to get there and I'm not happy until I get there. You're going to have a very hard time seeing results, because it literally makes the process miserable. And if the process is miserable, you're not going to be ultimately consistent with the process long enough to sustain that. There's only so many people that can be in that misery consistently for long enough to see results. We're talking literally years, probably half a decade, to get to a place where you're really like, close to your genetic potential. If you do a lot of things right, probably even longer if you don't. So yeah, I think this is a common trap where most skinny fat beginners, I would say, fall into this trap, because with the skinny fat beginner, they're going to lose weight as maybe the first step to get leaner, to look better. And then they're going to realize that they really don't have a lot of muscle on them. So then they're going to start to kind of think about the muscle building process similar as the weight loss process, that it's the same kind of pace at which it happens. And then they realize that muscle growth can be 2, 3, 4 times as slow as losing body fat. And then it really hits them that this has to be a long process to get to that physique that they want. And they're comparing themselves probably to influencers or someone who's been doing this for several years, maybe has better genetics, didn't start as skinny fat. And I think this really gets to people. And that discouragement obviously then makes you less likely to work. Because if you have optimism bias, if you think things will work out, everything will kind of work a little bit better for you. You're going to stay motivated. But if you're already kind of second guessing the whole process and you're in that mode of like, yeah, this might not work for me, and you start questioning the return on investment, because lifting and progressing is so hard. And if you question the return on investment, you may as well just find other ways to get that same dopamine hit or that same enjoyment from other areas of your life where you're able to progress at a more consistent pace. Because with building muscle, like you might do 3 months, you don't even know if it works or not. I mean, you might see some small progress, like, measures go up or feels a little bit tighter, but you don't know if it's fat, if it's muscle, you don't know what's going on. And most people don't have the skills as well to assess. They don't track their workouts, for example. They don't look at the actual circumference measurements. They don't look at other kind of objective data to point out, what's going on. So they're kind of just running blind. And I think when you're running blind and you maybe have a natural tendency to be a little bit more pessimistic or not have as much self-confidence, this will really get to you. And you're going to drop off and you're going to lose weight and lose the progress you've accomplished since you regained back the weight. So yeah, I think this is absolutely one of the key tenets if you're looking at psychology, is what do you compare yourself with and who do you compare yourself with, right? Even in your own journey, we say don't compare yourself to other people, but who are you comparing yourself to as yourself? Like, are you comparing yourself to yourself a year ago or 5 years ago, or yourself that it's maybe 5 years from now that you imagine is going to be this ideal Greek god physique, like walking on the beach somewhere at 8% body fat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a big, big problem.
Yeah. I also feel like for anything that you're doing long-term and long-term habits, at some point you need to like take the pressure off, if that makes sense. Like, you still want to be goal oriented, but you don't want to feel this tension around it, right? So if you look at a lot of the long-term hobbies people have, like they're playing video games, or I collect cards, or people play sports, they're enjoying themselves. They take it seriously, but they're also enjoying themselves. So if you make training and hypertrophy and strength training just about pressure and stress, I think it'll be hard to do it long term, because there's not that lightness and that enjoyment that I think needs to be there when you plan to do something for decades.
Yeah. And the question is, then what? When you get to the goal, like, then what? What's going to happen when you get, let's say, to 225 bench? Then what? Right? Because the process that you have to follow to get to the 225 bench is the same process you're going to follow. Like, you're still going to do majority of the same habits and things and the same lifestyle to maintain that 225, and then also to improve beyond that 225. And if you stop doing that process, the 80% of the most important things, you're going to lose the 225. So ultimately, your life as an advanced lifter will be pretty much as similar to your life as an intermediate lifter. You're still going to have to pay a lot of attention to your calories, macros, things of that nature, still be consistent in the gym, still put in effort, still train. So a lot of the basic principles stay the same. So if you don't enjoy those principles now, if you don't understand, if you can't enjoy at least a little bit of the process, I understand frustration is also part of the game. If you're not frustrated, there's very little desire and urgency to try to get better and improve. Like, every emotion kind of has its place in time. Like, even, jealousy, even like whatever gets you going. Maybe the first time you went to the gym was because you broke up, with your girlfriend, and then, you were jealous that she's now dating a jack guy, and you're like, damn it, I gotta get my deadlift to 4 plates, or whatever. But whatever gets you going. But the problem is, if people double down on that one particular dimension and they missed out on a lot of the other things that is going on here, and they don't explore the beauty of the journey itself. Like, one of the reasons I love going to the gym, and I would go even if my results basically stayed the same, is the fact that I'm able to challenge myself with something every single day. And I think that's something that in a gym setting is very controlled, and you can do that. You can test your limits. And even if I didn't improve, it would still kind of push me outside of my comfort zone, because I think that's one of the big things. Like, there's only so many ways that you can control and have agency within pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. That's one of those things where lifting, for me personally, it's kind of like almost like a mindfulness experience as well. I go there. I mean, I have my goals, obviously, because that determines my direction, but it's really all about accumulating the reps, the reps are not just the reps in the set, but reps are showing up in the gym, doing my meals, and just kind of running the routine. And there's really a lot of beauty in that. I think that compound effect of those small little decisions really plays a huge role long term.
Yeah, I think what's great about it is just how measurable it can be, right? If you have like a training log, like it's very tangible. I don't think most kind of hobbies and endeavors can be as measurable as training. So that's something that I like, that control aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then I like just the very small compounding effect that you were kind of talking about. It's like, it's the consistency of the day-to-day actions, whether it's in the kitchen or in the gym, that are going to make long-term impact, as opposed to like just having the best workout. It's consistently good workouts, consistently being smart, consistently pushing yourself, consistently making good nutrition habits, and then results kind of creep up over time.
Yeah, there's a certain feeling when you are dialed in and you're being very consistent, and there's almost like this kind of flywheel effect. You're a bit more consistent with your steps, so you're sleeping better. You're more recovered, and you're hitting it hard in the gym, so you're enjoying the workouts more because you're seeing a bit more progress. Then because you're progressing in the gym, you're also more incentivized to pay attention to your diet. Now diet is better, you're losing weight, you're looking better, you're also looking to walk more. So there's this massive amount of positive feedback kind of happening across different domains, which is incredible, and you feel awesome when that hits. And I think that's something that is a really nice kind of feature of the fitness sort of journey. The other one, I think it's really important to point out, is just how do you view the fitness journey in general? Like, a lot of people will still see this as a kind of like a finite game where you have certain rules defined, where, I'm going to get to this goal and that's it. The most important mindset shift that every person needs to make when you're really committing to a long-term goal and you want to be a healthy individual is to start seeing this journey as an infinite journey, meaning there's no way to win at living a healthy lifestyle. There's no competition who's going to get to a healthy lifestyle quicker, who's going to get to a certain amount of weight faster. This is you, and this is you doing it for the rest of your life. So it's an infinite journey. There are some milestones, certain things that will occur on the journey, but it's really you committing that you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. And when you're making that form of commitment, when that's the expectation, then you're able to surrender to the process. And then the next question is more, how do you do it better and how do you do it more efficiently? The question isn't anymore whether you're going to do it or not, because you're just committed to that infinite journey. You know what it takes. Because any one of us, if we push super hard for 5 years, you stop training for a year, you're going to lose almost all your results. Yes, there's some muscle memory, but you're going to lose it. It's basically use it or lose it. So that's, I think, that concept that people need to grasp is the infinity of it. And that's in one way how almost everything worth having in life works. You want to be a great dad. It's not going to be just doing a month of Disney trips and awesome compliments, gifts, and all kinds of stuff to your kids. It's an infinite journey. Like, there's no way to win at being, a great dad. It's just a continuous process of doing things day in, day out that make you a great dad. And if you defy those principles and if you stop doing that, you're going to stop being a great dad. So in a sense, like, there's no, like, I'm going to get the college degree and I'm going to be a doctor forever. Like, you still have to work on that. You're going to be maybe a doctor, but you're going to be a really bad one if you don't, continue educating yourself and following up with things. So I think that's kind of the mentality a lot of us got potentially in school, as the school system is designed to get a grade, you pass and you move on to the next one. And I think that's sort of the mentality that kind of gets instilled in us, that there's these finite things you kind of accomplish and you always have. I mean, most things in life that are valuable don't work like that. So I think that mentality might be what kind of initially started this. And I think that's something that maybe we can try to change over time. But yeah, like, I think this is the crux, or maybe one of the root causes of the problem, why so many people are not really committed to the journey as much as they potentially could be.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we're transparent, that you're not always locked in, right? If it's an infinite journey, there's going to be periods of times where you're more relaxed and you might question, why am I not locked in? Why am I not eating as well as I have in the past? Or why am I less excited about this training that's happening? I can only speak for myself, but there's periods of time where, over the course of 10 years, I'm solid. But there could be these like 3-4 month spurts where I'm just not as locked in. And then you kind of question that, and then you kind of tighten up. And I think people who watch a lot of YouTube, they assume that everyone's just like locked in all the time. And these are people who have incentive to be locked in because they're making money off fitness. But most people are not always locked in, because if it's a long-term game, it's very challenging to just always be so locked in and strict. And there will be times that you just naturally are focused on something else, like you said, being a dad or something. Like maybe you're more focused on being a dad, and it's kind of like balls in your juggling, and that's kind of in the air right now. And so I feel like it's important for people to not look and say, oh, well, I need to be perfect. These people are perfect. I'm not them. I'm going to fail.
Yeah. I think this is a major misconception. There's nobody doing this perfectly. It's never going to happen, because humans are not perfect by design. So no action will be perfect. They might hit it really well for a period of time, for 6 months, a year, or whatnot. But even then, just the nature of our emotional states, which fluctuates almost daily, and also our cognitive biases, it just simply doesn't allow us to operate on a binary, good or bad mode and consistently being good all the time. So it's just not going to happen. And I like to kind of explain this. There's times when you play offense, and there's times when you play defense. When it's time to play defense, the strategies that you used to do offense don't really apply anymore. Now you're more in the kind of ambiguity, damage control, trying to minimize the losses. And I think most people in fitness and weight loss know how to play offense. Yeah. They know how to cut calories. They know how to push hard. They know how to progress. Like when time comes, when everything is well and done in life, and everything, kids are happy, wife's happy, parents are happy, nobody's sick, everything is awesome. That might be like 2 months out of the year, right? And then the other 10 months of the year, you have periods where there's always something going on, right? There's always something happening. And then you have maybe another 1 or 2 months where kind of shit hits the fan. And then you need to really, really, really sort of dig in and see how to survive that period without that being a major setback. For the average person out there, I think the ability to minimize the damage in a bad day, or not let the bad day turn into a week or a month and further on, is actually the most valuable skill that they could have. Way more valuable than whether they're going to eat more than 150 or 170 grams of protein, or whether they're going to be able to diet on 2100, 2200, or 2000 calories. The ability to rebound fast, the ability to have some form of minimal viable routine that can run, even if life is the worst that it's ever been. Having that routine that will still be there as an anchor, as a structure that you can trust, is huge. It's kind of like viewing fitness as a dial rather than an on and off switch. The average person views fitness as an on and off switch. So they're either on a plan or they're off a plan. And people will even say this. If you ask them, they're going to say, oh, I'm on a plan. Like most people will say, oh, I'm on a routine. I'm following this program. Then you ask them 2 months later, oh, I'm not on the plan anymore, right? So they're just very binary in the way they think about this. The most advanced guys, like guys that have been really doing this for a long time, that have incredible physiques, are typically on a dial. Yes, there are times when you dial 10 out of 10 and you're just on, and everything is amazing. You're hitting PRs. You're not missing your creatine, forgetting your stuff. You're tracking stuff, like you're weighing yourself daily. You're taking your measurements, taking pictures. Maybe you hired a coach. Like everything is sort of working in that. You're really trying to do a strong push. But then when life hits you, which will inevitably happen to all of us at some point, the dial goes back to maybe 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, which you're still maybe hitting the gym 3 times per week. Maybe it's shorter workouts, maybe 30 minutes. You're still keeping an eye on protein and calories, not tracking as much. And you're sort of just not letting things get totally out of control. The goal is not necessarily to be always a 10 out of 10. The goal actually is to never to turn off the lights, right? Yeah. To make sure that the dial is always at least above a 0. So at least the lights are on. You know how those low switches work when that click happens. Just don't let it click, right? Whether you're at the lowest or at the highest, that's not as important as just don't let it click. When you turn off the lights, man, you're in the dark, and it's very hard to work in the dark, because when you lose momentum, everything feels 10 times harder. Even though the same habits that you used to do maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago felt very manageable, now because you've lost momentum, the perception of difficulty of those habits is infinitely harder. Like you just start dreading the whole process until you regain momentum again. And I think momentum preservation is something that almost nobody talks about, and is a huge factor in consistency. Like any advanced person, if you kind of talk to them a little bit, they have this way, maybe they're not conscious about it, of preserving momentum. They're not going to allow themselves to have consecutive 0 days for like multiple weeks in a row. They're going to do something. You'll see a guy do a set of push-ups in a hotel. Like you'll see a guy get a little bit more protein or check his step count. Like there are certain subconscious mechanisms of, I don't want to lose what I've accomplished. And I think that's sort of a huge kind of revelation that I've seen over the years, having done so much client work. It's so different compared to when you see the literature and you talk to other like very fit guys who've been doing this for a decade. Like you realize like it's really the damage control aspect to making the bad days less bad rather than making the good days amazing that determines success, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. I had a streak of about, it was just over 1,000 days on MyFitnessPal from like maybe nice. 2018 to 2021. And I had days where the dial was 1, where I didn't eat well and I very loosely put in the calories into MyFitnessPal, but at least I did it. And I kept the streak going and I kept the momentum going. And it wasn't an off. I didn't feel like I had to start a new streak. And I'm not saying everything has to be kind of gamified, but just giving that 1 out of 10 effort was so much more powerful than 0. It let the next day be a fresh day, as opposed to the last day feeling like a failure.
Yeah, I'm learning now to improve. I'm trying to improve my Spanish. So one of the things that I do as a minimum viable plan is I'm going to do one single lesson in Duolingo, which literally takes like 30 seconds, right? So it's just something, if I forget, so it's, I'm about to go to bed. I'm already in the toilet. I already brushed my teeth. I've already done everything. And I forgot the Spanish, learning for the day. I want to make it a daily thing, right? I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to pull up my phone. I'm going to do that one exercise and then go to sleep, because it's easier not to do it. And there's more pain in not doing it than doing it. Because if I don't do it, I'm going to break my streak and I'm going to feel horrible about it. And I started this in the beginning of the year. So I already have like 40 days or whatever, 41 days of consistency. So when I see that email that says, hey, you have a 41-day streak, do you want to have a 42-day or whatever the reminder is, I'm going to literally wake up if I need to. If I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to do it. And I think that's sort of the minimal viable action. Does that 30 seconds really improve my Spanish like dramatically? Or it doesn't make any difference here for the most part, but it adds that momentum that the next day I'm more incentivized to keep the streak going, and I keep the streak going. And I know for a year from now, it's going to get to a much higher level. And that's sort of the way I'm thinking about it. Same with guitar playing. I might do 5 minutes of guitar exercises rather than trying to pull like an hour session. So yes, I would. There's so many life examples where this is huge.
Yeah, it's like, what's the minimum I can do to adhere to this, even in a bad circumstance? I think people
exactly
when they plan for things, they think, what can I adhere to in the best circumstance? And they're not planning for the downside of kind of like just reality or a black swan event happening or something where it's going to derail them, and then that switch goes off. If they had just planned for it in advance, then they'd be more likely to succeed, hit that baseline in bad situations, and they could do more in a good situation still.
Exactly.
Cool. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw out some mental models, and I may give some examples, and I'd just love to get your thoughts on it. I know we chatted about this offline. Something I think we both use in terms of decision-making, but pretty much mental models are just different ways to think through problems and make decisions. So the first one actually is Pareto Principle, and this can be used in a million different ways. But one thing I was thinking about, and I'd just love to get your feedback, is that 20% of your training can give you 80% of the enjoyment. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, absolutely. It is true. I mean, you'll find if you distribute all the exercises in the gym, maybe the 20% you really only enjoy the arm exercise and the rest kind of sucks, but 80% of the enjoyment just comes from hitting the arms. That's fine. This distribution doesn't always apply like exactly on point, but it is very true. Like just the the application in the gym, for example, of 20% of volume on specific parts might result in the 80% of growth. I don't know necessarily if that's the exact ratio, because there might be certain body parts that are lagging behind, and that would be the ones that are kind of growing because the rest kind of caught up. Potentially also to be true, but I would say with enjoyment is most likely applicable. I know that I hate Bulgarian split squats, but I love doing my bicep curls. I love doing my chest. I love doing my shoulders. So it kind of makes up for the suck that I guess you could call the other stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like that's why, because people ask me all the time, or they'll put in the comments like, "Hey, is it okay for me to do this thing? I like it." And it's like, yeah, you should definitely do it. Like, fit in that 20% that you really enjoy. Don't take that away to be 100% optimal or research-based or follow a plan if you don't enjoy it. Do 80% of the suck if you know that's going to move to your results, and do the 20% because that enjoyment may create more consistency and excitement around training in general.
Yeah, man, and that there's a lot of stuff in the day as well that kind of me going for a walk, for example. I don't need to make it an hour walk to get 80% of the enjoyment of it. Like I get 80% of the enjoyment of it even for like a 10-minute walk. And so I don't need to put that much pressure on myself to get the results that I'm looking for. Like the improvement of happiness for me is going to happen even if I elevate my sleep by a little bit, rather than just having to just revamp the whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit where the Pareto principle will apply. It also kind of ties into what we mentioned earlier. When you design your minimal viable routine, there's certain things with the Pareto principle that will just have much higher leverage. Like paying attention to your calories and protein will have way more leverage than paying attention to your meal timing or how many supplements you're taking, or how you're timing your carbs and fats, the ratio of the carbs and fats and all that. So if you just pay attention a little bit to the calories and protein, suddenly you're going to be able to retain 80% of the effect. So it's huge. I think looking at things through this principle is, for me in business especially, very, very valuable. I know YouTube for me is like the 20% of all the things that I do that delivers 80% of my results as a business. So it's just the way, I kind of like to think about most things. I think it's just from an efficiency perspective, a really important principle.
Awesome. So the next one, I don't have an example. I'm just, it's Occam's razor, and it's when faced with competing explanations for the same phenomenon, the simplest is likely the correct one. Does anything come to mind?
Well, yeah. When let's say I talk to a client and he's like, Mario, my diet isn't working. I screwed up. And then there's a lot of different explanations for why someone might screw up a diet on a weekend or whatnot. And yeah, you could start getting into, well, is this person's circadian rhythm out of alignment? Is his whatever training steps or energy expenditures might not be, or is it honestly just the fact that he made a mistake which he let escalate and ended up becoming a lot more calories than he planned for, because things just got out of hand, and we need to plan for situations where that day there might be something unique that happened that triggered him, or that got him off track, where that one decision spiraled out of the control, and we can start seeing, okay, why is that occurred? Essentially, Occam's razor is, if you're going to do detective work to figure something out, try to figure out what's the most obvious issue here, rather than wasting all this time on all the potential, ways things could have gone wrong. If someone says, I'm not building muscle, well, the first thing you check is training effort. You check whether that person's, volume is okay. Is their form in the gym okay? Like you don't go out there and check whether their, volume is 10 or 12 sets, or whether their bicep curl is, a preacher curl, or is it like standard, easy bar curl. Like that's not going to make that much of it. There's going to be some difference, but it's not going to be the difference between them seeing no results or all the results. And I think that's sort of where, as a coach, if you don't apply the Occam's razor, you're not going to be as efficient. Like, how are you going to figure out? So essentially, Occam's razor is not eliminating all the options, not saying it cannot be the case that it's something small, but where do you start, right? The question is, where do you start investigating? So with diet, you always start investigating with calories. Then you start investigating what could have gotten people out of a deficit, rather than start looking at all the other second, third order consequences, or why that might not have worked. Same with training. You look at effort and some of these basics. With sleep, you look at, does this person actually go to bed on time? Yeah. Right? Like, is he in bed on time? Like, does he have enough hours in the bed? If someone says, I'm not sleeping, more than 7 hours and I'm struggling with it, You don't go in, well, man, you need to buy yourself an 8 sleep. You need to, cool off, the room. Like you need to go out as gadgets, install like 5 different apps on your phone to track your HRV and all this. Are you spending enough time in the bed? Question number one, right? And that automatically, if that is not fixed, I mean, the rest of the stuff is just relevant, right? So I kind of like to think of that Occam's razor from that particular perspective.
Yeah, like I noticed that maybe, I'm just saying, I guess like 80, 90% of people in the gym who ask me questions about why they're not improving, I start with progressive overload and try to figure out, are they achieving progressive overload? And the answer is always no. And then it's like, how do I help them achieve progressive overload, right? They're not tracking, they're not pushing to failure, like just all the really simple stuff. It's never like they don't have the right exercise selection. Sometimes, okay, I'm not getting the right mind muscle quick, but typically it's that they're just not achieving progressive overload. And if they're not losing weight, they're not eating few enough calories, right? Like you can
exactly
start with that, because that's the most likely outcome.
Or they're showing up in the gym in the first place. If someone says, I'm not getting results in the gym and not training well, like you'd be surprised. Like, how many workouts did you do in the last 30 days? Oh, I've been to the gym like 5 times. I mean,
okay. Less likely. Yeah.
What are you gonna what are you gonna do then, right? So you're gonna just have to show up more often and then start working on progressive and beyond that. So I think this type of thinking, and this is all kind of, I'm very inspired to talk about these because of Charlie Munger. Like generally, like I like to learn a lot. There's his book is there in the back there. I have his almanac, and I kind of go through some sections of that and reflect. And I've read it a few times. So I think in general, it's just, you have to have mental models if you're going to be an effective human, because it's going to be very difficult to operate with limited time and energy constraints. So Occam's razor is one of those. I'm a big fan of general, like razors are excellent. So razors just save a lot of time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So something I actually do is, if I have a problem, sometimes I'll talk with like a GPT and I'll list out a bunch of different mental models, and I'll say, think through all of these and then kind of give me the pros and cons of my decision. And it's just kind of a nice way to kind of dump a lot of information for me to review.
It's very true. Like I'm running out of, I'm hitting the daily limit on the advanced mode with GPT on my plus plan all the time. So I was even like, today I was thinking, I need to upgrade to Pro. I was like, this is the only thing I really need it for. So I was thinking, I'm just going to get the Pro. Like, I'm just tired of hitting the limit because it just happens at the most, inconvenient time. And so probably have to eventually pull the switch.
Play with deep research. It's pretty solid.
I was thinking about trying that out as well.
Okay. Next one here is, and I don't know if you can relate this, but it's prospect theory. And that's, we are more sensitive to small losses than big losses or big gains. Do you think that has any application in fitness?
Well, I know loss aversion is a big one for sure. And I know that there's the pain of loss is much greater than the pleasure that we get from gain. So that certainly has application. Whether we feel the small losses more than big losses, I guess the question would be more frequency. If the small losses are more frequent, then I would imagine that to be the case, because it's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts. That also, on the fitness context, I'm not necessarily sure that would necessarily even apply, because let's say someone makes a lot of bad decisions day to day, they might have kind of like optimism bias working in their favor, where they're like, well, things are just going to work out. It's just today, it's just this one meal. It's just this one thing. Because humans are generally not really good at estimating the compound effect of habits over a long period of time. This is why we're in trouble, like for the most part, because we cannot see into the future. We just see more like immediate. So there's a lot of hyperbolic discounting occurring where you're sort of looking at the immediate effect. So I'm not necessarily sure if that would apply directly to fitness and those decisions, maybe in the diet or training decisions, but I can see it potentially apply maybe in economics or some like more or a different field, right?
That's where it came from, like a Nassim Taleb type of situation, where if you see yourself losing small amounts of money every day, it's actually more devastating than one day with the big loss. So it kind of comes from that.
I think I mean, it does make sense to me if it's a matter of frequency, right? So if it's a single, if you're doing big losses every day, you're going to feel the big losses more than the small losses. So it's a sense of frequency, and then that I would absolutely agree, because if you're sort of like getting a little bit of that torture mechanism where it's just a little bit of torture every day, so it never ends, and you're not, you kind of lose hope. Whereas if it's just a big hit, rip the Band-Aid off and you're good, versus trying to rip the Band-Aid off for like 3 hours and then you're in constant pain. I think that there potentially could be some of that for sure. And I can see that, I can see that, of course, having that negative effect on psychology for sure.
Cool. So the last one I want to pull out here is Lollapalooza. So what Lollapalooza is, it's when a bunch of different kind of factors come together and provide a outsized kind of expectation or result. And I have a few examples here. You can chat about any of them or anything else that comes to mind. One is kind of like Mike Israetel's kind of blow up. The other is Brian Johnston. I don't know if you know him. He's the Don't Die guy.
Yeah,
and
I know him. Yeah.
And then there's also something like Bitcoin. And like, for all of these, there's certain things that kind of come to mind for me. There's a lot of social proof. There's an element of scarcity. And I can just kind of see these things kind of coming together. So maybe take one of those three and just kind of give me your thoughts on how you think it all came together.
Yeah, it's interesting because each component that goes into success by itself might not be as very significant or might not make anybody successful. But when you when you combine, the effect ends up becoming like a non-linear, like multiplicative effect. And it just starts to essentially, make you stand out. For example, like Mike's example or Brian's example is just because you add so many unique elements together, and suddenly the multiplied effect of that is so much greater than the additive effect of those low components. And then that potentially might end up making the person stand out so much more that then when the algorithm is presenting a couple different options, like you have that one other option that just slightly better. So it's enough to tip the point to a level where the person is going to suddenly start dominating. Because the difference maker between a lot of these, it's kind of small, right? It's kind of professional athletes. A lot of them are pretty good. Like all of them are really good compared to the average person. But then it's small differences that start making like a huge difference in following and success and performance on the pitch and whatnot. So I think there's some of that in play here. The way I like to kind of conceptualize Lollapalooza and this is Charlie Munger is like one of his favorite ones. He always goes back to Lollapalooza. In most of the interviews, like I think he mentions it, because one of the ways that the reason he did is because when you start thinking about what affects human behavior, it's never like a single bias in isolation. So it's not just the confirmation bias at play. It's not just the present bias, like the one that you prefer something immediate now, rather, even if it comes at the expense of long term. It's almost universally all these things kind of interacting at once. And then if you kind of look at psychology research, like it's practically impossible. There's too many permutations to even to research this. Like, how would you research all these biases combined and the effects of that? And his sort of empirical kind of analysis and looking back at a lot of data, most likely through his investing, which is really a good proxy for human behavior, showed that there's these cumulative effects. Suddenly you get something that's much greater. Like for, an example of being, let's say Coca-Cola, right? You can have, flavor, water, and a couple of other little things combined, and suddenly you have value, right? But each one of those things is worthless by itself. Like it's not really that important. Suddenly you get value, and then you get brand, then you add all these other things. Suddenly it blows up. So in fitness, I kind of see it. It's almost like the non-linear effect of when you have your nutrition dialed and your training dialed and your sleep dialed and your walking dialed in and your psychology dialed in, and suddenly you get results that are just exponentially better than if you had a little bit of that system running. When you had the whole system running, it just all feeds into each other. There's tremendous feedback loops that kind of feed into it. Like you're less stressed out, meaning better workouts, more PRs, more muscle growth, meaning the diet is also more likely to stick to the diet. You push harder the diet, you lose body fat, you're more incentivized now to walk more and sleep better and take care of the diet even more. So it's just kind of this amazing kind of cumulative effect that occurs. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this, and I think it can explain a lot of the phenomena where people are just confused, like how is this person succeeding and I'm not succeeding? And it's that this person is not doing some magical secret gimmicky thing that you're missing. Is they're doing a lot of the fundamental principles at once, consistently, slightly better than you are. That's sort of how I think about it, right? So they're like, if you kind of think about it, it's just a little bit more marketing done consistently all the time, in combination with really good content, in combination with really good presentation, in combination with really good charisma, in combination with just a little bit better. Like you can find examples probably of each one of these things done really well by someone else. But when you kind of combine every single one of those elements into one person, that person will blow up on social media, for example. So I kind of like to think of it of that in sort of from that nature, because it's kind of the rare skill set combination. If you analyze someone like Elon Musk, it's like, how many people are amazing engineers who also understand hiring, who also have sold a company at the right time, to have enough funds, who were introduced with this particular group of friends who are also into this to elevate this, and how many are also super intelligent geniuses at the same time who are immigrated, that have a great work culture. Like, if you just stack like all these, and I've done some analysis on this, you can even like feed this into ChatGPT. Out of 8 billion people, you get one.
Yeah.
Like when you stack all the things like yeah, so the probability of having that one person is actually not that high. If you stack all these elements of someone who does all these skills at the same time, it's very low. So I kind of think of that as almost like the reverse of the Lollapalooza. It's like when you stack a lot of different things, that you get this one amazing outcome that wasn't possible with any of the components, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think a lot about Bitcoin in regarding this, because it says like a 2 trillion market cap now. Like a lot of the things that were done in its creation, and then the mystery around it, like being anonymous, having a limited supply where it has, like, it's creating scarcity, it's creating social proof. It's created so many of these things that it's kind of now at a point where I have a hard time believing it's not going to continue to be successful over a few decades, unless like quantum computing breaks it or something like that.
There's a chance that that could happen with some of the recent stuff that I've seen. There's some potential, but I mean, I'm a Bitcoin investor, so I don't want to, whenever you invest in some stuff, you don't want to just keep disclosure. But I'm a believer in general the mission of decentralization, and I do believe in technology. I do think money is outdated the way it's currently done, and the way we're able to just print and invent money and devalue everybody's purchasing power, and the fact that compare prices of things like eggs, meats, and things that are good foods in the 60s and 70s and to today, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And reality is this has to be solved. Like, this is not a problem that can keep going indefinitely. Like, it's someone will have to solve it at some point. I'm glad the Bitcoin is there just to offer an alternative. Maybe there's another alternative that's even better than Bitcoin, but at the moment I don't see a better solution than something like that, because we have to get back to checks and balances, and I think Bitcoin is one of those ways that it can happen. There's actually a really interesting book that I, again, no affiliation whatsoever. It's called Fiat Money. Fiat Food, sorry. It's from the author that wrote the book about Bitcoin. It's called Fiat Food. And it's interesting. I read this just a couple of months ago, and I found it very insightful. It kind of goes into, again, the monetary system and all of that, but also kind of links it back to the food supply. And I mean, the book is also biased in many different ways. So you have to take it for a grain of salt. The book, I think, is biased toward the low carb community, to maybe the carnivore community to some extent as well. But it argues that the rise in food prices and the general ingredients of healthy food have contributed a lot to this whole problem we have today, where fast food and junk food are also incentivized and subsidized to be cheaper and to continue being distributed. And it's one of the reasons why we even have so much junk food. So I don't necessarily know. It's just a theory. I mean, I think it was a fun read for me, kind of coming from the Bitcoin world. I thought it was interesting. But yeah, if you can look, they have to agree with the whole book. I think people, when read a book, they think they're just going to agree with everything. If you agree with 3 things or find 3 things useful from a book, I think even better actually would be to read something you don't agree with. So I read a bunch of these books and materials by guys like David Ludwig, or guys that are just completely ignorant of calorie theory and energy balance and whatnot, just to see like how can this very smart person get to this conclusion, right? Because clearly, I mean, you're smart, but how did you get to this false conclusion, right? And then you kind of follow the train of logic, like how did he end up here, and what were his biases ultimately that led him now to still double down on his position, which is obviously one of the other biases. If you get challenged, you can change your mind or you can double down on your position. They just keep doubling down and changing the goalpost. So it's kind of interesting. I think it's important to read stuff from people, listen to people you don't agree with, and also people you do agree with, just kind of provide that balance. I always book a little bit more time. So
awesome. Cool. So I want to move into kind of a more fun and training direction again. So what is your Mount Rushmore, your 4 favorite chest exercises, and why?
Barbell bench press has always been the exercise I wanted to get good at. Ever since I started lifting, I had friends who were really good at the bench. I was always the one that was falling behind. I always wanted to catch up, and I think I did catch up now and probably exceed quite a lot compared to back when I started. But it was one of the lifts that we used in my first gym as the benchmark lift. Everybody was like, it all is about how much you bench. Nobody was really paying attention to the squat or the deadlift or anything else. Like we didn't even deadlift initially. So we're just all about the bench. I love the barbell bench just because of that, I guess, tradition and more bias. I don't think necessarily it's the most effective exercise. It's really good, but not necessarily the most effective ever exercise for everybody, depending on your anatomy, right? I love the low incline dumbbell bench press.
Okay.
That's essentially when you're doing an incline at about a 15 to 20 degree rather than going to a 30 or 35 degree incline on the bench. I found this to for me personally, like I found a difference of being able to go lower and get a deeper stretch on my chest to provide, and I actually almost attribute my I've broken my chest growth plateau using this particular exercise in combination with push-ups, which would be the third, like weighted push-up, because of this element of going into a much deeper stretch, having to really get strong on those dumbbell inclines, because I was mostly benching before and my bench was pretty strong, but because I could arch so much and I could use a lot of powerlifting technique and leg drive and all these other things, when I introduced the low incline dumbbell press and the weighted push-up, I eliminated a lot of the help. So I actually started with a very low weight compared to what I should be doing. And then as those lifts progressed, it really made a huge difference in my chest growth. So I would definitely put those in there. And lastly, one of my favorites for isolating has been the Bayesian chest fly. So essentially, it's one where you bend over between 2 cable stations, and normal fly would be palms together, and this one is thumbs go together. So essentially, your palms are facing back. And I found this exercise to be a great extra bit of that volume that you can throw in there without causing too much extra fatigue. And I did probably have it in my program for like 7-8 years now. I'm not doing it because I'm trying a pec deck that we have here in the gym to try to see if I can get a little bit more of that, not necessarily the lengthened position, but more the contraction, because I don't want to incur more muscle damage because I'm already pretty sore in my chest. So I'm trying to just work more the contraction portion, which generates less soreness for me and less fatigue. So I'm trying to throw in a bit more sets toward the end of the workout and just doing a little bit fast. But I ran the Bayesian chest fly probably for like 7-8 years. That would be like my entire stack, because I wouldn't even know what else to add there, to be honest. Like, what other exercise is there? I love the weighted push-ups. The only thing I don't like about it is the practicality. When I train with my brother in the gym, or I have friends in the gym, they can help me put the plates on. I bought a Kensui vest that you can just throw in like plates on it, so you can load up to about 60 kilos, which is my max. So that's the most that I've ever done. It'd probably go another plate. So you have a lot of potential. And as you go with those push-up bars, you can go much deeper as well. I ran dips for a long time, but the dip stations in gym is very so much that I gave up on it because it just changes. Every gym has a different dip station here. So it wasn't really as consistent as I wanted it to be. Some of the dip stations were unstable and whatnot. And I also found it to start really bothering my elbows a lot. When you get to very strong dips, I mean, when you start adding 50, 60 kilo dips, that's kind of where you get to all this trouble. So if I could keep only 2 of those, I'd probably keep the bench and the low incline. A third one would definitely be the push-up, and the fourth one would be one of the flies, just to throw that in there as well.
The Bayesian fly, so your thumbs are apart and then they go together at the end, or what?
Yeah, essentially like you're flaring out elbows. So essentially you're flaring out elbows, like same as you do for a normal chest fly, but instead of your palms facing each other, the palms are facing back. So you're just sort of bringing you have your shoulder slightly internally rotated, so it's kind of giving you that little bit of extra chest stimulation there that you would normally not get with the normal chest fly. And this is something I picked up from Menno Henselmans when I was looking through his and all the Bayesian exercises. You can go back to his.
So you're getting a little bit more in the shortened position then.
That's what I like to bias the exercise for, but the actual internal rotation of the shoulder helps across the entire range. But the way I like to bias these flies is more toward the shortened position, because it just incurs less overall muscle damage, and I found my chest to get extremely sore if I just do a lot of this lengthened work all the time. So I like to add some shortened work as well to potentially eke out a little bit more volume without breaking apart. And I feel like those types of exercises at sets of 15 to 20, maybe the extra blood flow or whatnot really helps me recover between the sessions of my benching faster. So if I have a session of benching and then my next upper body day might not be the bench, it might be a push-up or a machine or something else, and the high rep fly, the extra blood flow from the fly will recover me a little bit better before the next benching session, because those benching sessions are basically like, get into a level where I'm wrecked for at least 4 or 5 days, right?
Yeah, and are you still Larson pressing at all?
Not at the moment. I run it as one of the variations, but I'm not doing it at the moment. So I do run it maybe once a year. I'll do like a block, and that's just to break the habit of relying on leg drive too much, because my leg drive tends to can get out of control. Because I was trying to get to 160 kilo bench, and I was almost there, to be honest. Like I did 155, felt easy. I missed a 160. I did a 140 for 5 with 1 rep in a tank, so I should have been able to do 160. But when I got close to it, one time I got sick. The other time I got some kind of flu or whatever, like for 3-4 days, that took a setback. Another time I was so sore and beat up that I felt like I'm going to get injured if I keep pushing. So I just had 3 instances in the last year that I got close to doing the 160 bench, and I didn't do it. So I'm hoping maybe this year I'm going to finally kind of do that, because that was like a big milestone for me to be able to do a double body weight bench press. Like that was something that I really wanted to do for a long time. So
yeah, fair enough. It's good to just have these little side quests and goals. Like I have a goal to do an added body weight chin up, and I'm not quite there, but I'm like, I'll get there eventually. It's just like a nice little side quest to keep things fun.
Yeah, man, it's really nice. I mean, that's just something I want to do. There's really no utility there. Like doing a single for 160 is totally useless for me at the moment. It's just more like a personal thing. I just wanted to kind of say that I did it, have it on video somewhere, just say, hey, I did this. Maybe when I'm, 70, 80 years old, hopefully I can, look back at it and say, look, this is, your granddad did a 160 kilo bench. Cool. Maybe then all the kids will be doing 160 kilo bench. You know how it is on Instagram now. You go out and you show a 500-pound deadlift, and everybody, like a 14-year-old is deadlifting 500 pounds, which is totally disconnected from reality, what you see in the gyms. Like, but still,
Yeah, it's definitely disconnected. All right, so I'm going to throw out some quotes here, some that you've said and some that others have said. Give me your first take. This one you said: after about 5 years of doing this seriously, you'll get your base physique, and that physique will not change a lot moving forward. You'll see some improvements, but an untrained eye may not be able to tell.
Yeah, only us who have been doing this for a very long time, who are coaches, who are in this industry, who love all this like nerdy stuff, can tell a 5% increase in side delt size compared to someone who is an average person looking at your physique after 5 years of very serious lifting. When you're already getting, let's say, really lean physique, you built a decent amount of muscle, they'll hardly be able to tell a difference between 5-10 pounds more muscle. Yeah, the legs look a little bit bigger, so what? They won't be able to tell a difference. Like I've had my photos seen by, thousands of people. In even some cases, people will just say, I look better after 5 years. They were going to say like, oh, you're like, your body's changed too much. And this is not, what are you saying? Like it worked for another 10 years to get, So, yeah, I mean, you do this for yourself. The bottom line is you do this for yourself. Like, don't rely on external validation as a way to, keep yourself motivated.
But the thing is, if you want external validation, you just get lean and stay lean, I guess, and do that, and you'll get more than putting on muscle and being a little bit fluffier. That's been my experience.
Yeah,
I got more compliments when I was really lean, with probably like 15 pounds less muscle than I do now. So you're not doing this for other people.
It's sad, man. It's sad. I wish people knew how hard it is to build muscle. Like, I really wish people knew how difficult it is to gain 5 pounds of muscle. Even if it took an extra 10 pounds of fat or 15 pounds of fat, the 5 pounds of muscle is way more valuable than losing 15 pounds of fat. Way, way more valuable. Because all you're doing with losing fat is just revealing the physique you have. If you don't have a physique to show, I mean, what are you going to, cut for? So yeah, I wish people knew just how difficult it is to gain muscle, especially after those initial stages. But yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe it's people don't. We were talking about scarcity before. It's almost like there's more scarcity in having abs than having muscles to the general population.
Yeah, maybe the general population confuses fat from muscle. People say, oh, I just got big arms, I'm big, I'm like all this stuff. And then when you do a DEXA scan, they see they're 40% body fat and they have lean body mass of very kind of a weak person, like in general, like they don't have a lot of muscle on them. So by the time they cut down to like a reasonable body weight, they realize they don't have any muscle. And sometimes that might be a factor that tends to be confused. To be fair, even DEXAs at very high body weight tend to report a lot more fat-free mass than the person really has because of the extra water and whatnot. So it ends up becoming like this weird thing where people say, well, I'm 250 now. If I get to 200, I'm going to be shredded. And then they get to 175 and they're still not shredded. So it's just the way some of these metrics also not very perfect. But 100% agree with you, man. I think glorification of abs and being shredded is like almost like the it's in a way like the worst thing that has happened to this industry. It's just totally moved away from pursuit of health and strength and actual like real benefits of this. Because below 15% body fat, let's say below 12% body fat, really there's no point in really existing at that level long term. Like you just don't get any benefits. You just get worse training, you get worse recovery for the most part, and you just feel more miserable for most people.
The challenge is that, I know you like to like invert, but if you're inverting and your goal is to get as many views on a video to grow your business, then you're going to focus on what the general population is excited about. So it actually puts influencers in a challenging position where being honest and authentic on what you think is best for the person will not get you views. So then they're not going to watch it and actually not take in that information. Or you can feed into their desires and then it'll grow your business and your YouTube views. Like the algorithm's interesting in that respect.
Yeah, I guess the way you reel people in and then how you can, work with that later on, that could be discussed. And that's what a lot of these people that are really good at content do. You kind of get people, man, with a clickbait and then eventually sort of show the reality of how things are. I think it does make a big difference to know to know what the audience thinks is important, and I think that's sort of where you can start, and then eventually lead them to the truth. I'm doing this as well. Like I'm making videos about, let's say, getting to 10 or 12% body fat. Like I'm not saying you should get to 6, but I'm saying like, and every once in a while I'll make a video like 15 is great or 12 is great. I'll try to really add the message in there just to help people understand that it is ultimately something. It's all about what you can sustain. So it's ultimately a lifestyle. And I personally don't sustain 10% body fat all year round. And I think it's worse for me than 12 or 15. So yeah, you just got to tell people what's the truth.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next one here. Losing social connection is very bad for your mental health.
Yeah, I would say so. And then this is what has happened. In some extent to the Western world in general. I, for example, try to talk to my parents and talk to friends and keep a lot of connections, which is a lot of work. It's not something that kind of naturally happens. because I do like to have a conversation with my dad almost every day, with my mom as well. Like I do like to have these types of things. And I know this is not necessarily the model of life that everybody will agree with. Maybe they don't do this kind of stuff, but I found it very important for me. I know my dad is not going to be around for a long time, and I know that, I'm not going to be here for a long time. So I'm trying to essentially, like, since we're lucky in a way to share this particular moment in this particular timeline at the same time, and he's the reason why I'm here, and my mother is the reason why I'm here in the first place, I'd rather share some, even basic conversations with them. Doesn't have to be a very deep conversation, because I think there's value in that element. Because in the end, both the pawn and the king go into the same box when the game is over. So it doesn't matter. Like, we're all going to eventually die. So the only thing we have left is to try to enjoy a bit more of the present moment together, and kind of observe life in time as it passes by together, because ultimately that's what we humans, we're all finite, right? Maybe Brian Johnson is not going to be finite, but
I was going to say maybe Brian Johnson is
maybe he's going to be the one to figure it out. And if he does, or anybody else does, I'll be very happy with this. But currently, one of the defining characteristics of a living being, of a human, is the fact that we're here only for a limited amount of time. And I know death is something that people don't talk about now, and it's just almost like a taboo. It's often an avoidant thing to talk about, but most greatest thinkers of all time have had a really close relationship with death, and they were looking through life from a perspective of death, which generated an enormous amount of sense of urgency, which made them make decisions that they would have otherwise not made. I mean, a lot of what modern humans are living, like, they're going to live forever. They're almost like ignoring, in a sense, like the inevitable fact that you're going to get older, fact that your body's going to change, fact that your family or friends are not going to be around anymore. And I think this is something that maybe is impartially responsible for the mental health crisis, if you want to call it, along with, this is a multifactorial issue, like, along with social media, along with phones, along with distractions, along with bad food, along with obesity, along with glorification of certain values that are introduced into society, which don't necessarily align with the evolutionary biology of humans. So this is a very in-depth topic, and I like to look at things from that evolutionary perspective. If we humans evolved in tribes and groups of people where we're surrounded with people that we know, and we grew up in tribes where we primarily knew everybody, and at least a little bit, I think us being very disconnected and not having real deep friendships and people that we know for a long time that we can share like some depth with, is most likely contributing to the problem. So yeah, like, I might have a bit of a different take on life and things with some of this, maybe coming from kind of Croatia with stronger family ties, and more like a kind of like a Christian Catholic background, and with like certain things, like, and I'm coming from a small town as well, where things are different, right? So it's a very different mentality. Like, everybody knows everybody, and it also feels like a small tribe. I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that, and the way it's positioned. Maybe it's not the perfect way. There's no perfect way, but there's a lot that can be learned from that. Now I'm living in a big city. I'm living with in difference. So I've always tried to combine these different elements to see what would be ultimately a good life. And I think that's sort of the question, right? How do you find the answer to what's a good life for you? And so I think this is what I found makes me happy, and obviously, like, that's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, I find this just such an interesting topic, because we glorify goals and sacrificing social connections to achieve those goals at times. But those social connections, like you were saying, you can't let them get to zero on the dial or they're gone. So you have to still maintain those social connections for when you need them, because they are important for your mental health. But there are times that you need to sacrifice those for your other goals. And this has just been a challenge that I've had my entire life, is balancing my goal and my social connections and making them all work at the same time. And I would imagine that's the case for a lot of people, where it's like, friendship's really important, family's really important, but my goals are really important. And you don't want, people to hold you back in theory towards your goals, but then you could also lose that social connection, which is really important to humans.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily in agreement with a lot of the advice of, cut out all your friends, cut out family members, cut out everybody and whatnot. It really also comes from a position of not understanding social dynamics and how humans operate. Like if your mom tells you be careful, she's not saying that because she wants you to make less money. She's just saying that as a parent for you not to get hurt, which is her job as a parent who brought you
Yeah.
into the world. And same as I'm going to tell that to my daughter, even though she might interpret it as me saying like, hey, don't don't do that because, you want to limit me, as people kind of make up stuff. But it comes from a desire of a parent to protect their child, right? Which is, again, a very primal sort of feeling. So yeah, I think this is huge. In a nutshell, like it's not necessarily that you need the connections. I mean, you need them, but if you're kind of coming from a place of I'm going to keep all these people around because I need all these people, in a sense, the way I kind of like to see it is, does it make me more happy to do something nice for myself than do something nice for my dad? Like I'm much more happy if I do something nice for him. Like if let's say, I do something that improves my mom's life, that makes me more happy than if I improved something that, I got myself a little gadget or I went to a trip myself. I'm actually happier if she went for a trip because I'm like, oh, I did that for her. Right. And there's almost like that. There's this sense of, and it might be equal for some people, might be different, obviously. But, when I remember like when I contributed to buying my dad's car, I was happier than if I bought myself a car. Because like, it's just, for me, it made no difference, at this point, whether I'm going to have a car or not, but it made me very happy to know that he's well taken care of and that he could drive a car that he likes. It's just sort of I think that element, with gifts and giving to people and adding value, there's just so much more you get when you give than when you take. And that's just sort of been my kind of life experience so far. So I really try to be in that position where I can give a lot, because then I know that I'm going to feel much more better. And there's a certain sense of happiness that's not necessarily a happiness of momentary, like increase in joy, which I'd call, but there's a low key sense of you're good. You're able to sleep at night. You're able to live your life without having any major kind of things hanging over your head. And I think that's, almost as best as it can be. Just kind of like a consistent feeling at peace. I would attribute that more to happiness than these like highs and lows and all this nonsense that maybe some people would, we hit these milestones, we make this much money. I'm kind of thinking more of a sense of there's consistent peace where you're at ease. Like if your life ended right now, you'd be pretty happy with how you did. And I think that's sort of where that's the great equalizer. In sort of from my study of philosophy, what I felt like there's a lot of philosophers that would resonate with that as well.
Yeah, I think there's like this Jeff Bezos exercise where he imagines himself being 85 on his rocking chair looking back at his life, and he kind of makes decisions through that lens. So I think if you look back and feel content, then that's a win there. And then the doing more for others is really interesting, because when I was growing up, I was a lot more selfish, doing everything for me. And then my wife has always been the person who wants to invite people over, host them really well, spend money on them. And I didn't really get that at first, but I realized how much just like joy that's brought into our lives. And not all our friends are willing to do that. And it's like, well, we bring people together in our house. We throw a big Halloween party for the kids, and it's always a good time, and it really strengthens those relationships. And I've kind of leaned more in that direction over time because of her.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, I'll definitely say as well the same with my girlfriend. I mean, yeah, most of the reasons why I would hang out with people is because of her. To be honest, like I'm a very, I'd be. I mean, I'll obviously make it, from time to time, but it would be way less frequent than if I'm just stuck at my, I'm programming or learning guitar, playing video games, or working on content, or doing stuff that, it's a very kind of solo, or going to the gym. Like it's a very solo experience. So kind of these basic life moments and things that you would maybe, it feels like it's like a waste of time when it's not really a waste of time. I think that was always a big challenge to me, because it feels like to someone who's used to kind of always pushing, it almost like feels like you're not doing anything. And I think that's maybe the programming that ultimately will make you successful in certain things, but it's also something you kind of have to recognize as potentially a loop, in the way you're thinking, like a hole in your thinking. So yeah.
Interesting stuff here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw some pictures on the screen here.
Cool.
And just tell me the thing that comes to mind here. This is Mario back in the day.
Yeah, this is me in my old high school sort of CD gathering sense. Like all those CDs were probably video games, like 99% of them. That's my gaming PC. That's a little modem on there, like a little webcam and a printer. Like, yeah, the good old days. The Microsoft keyboard, the mouse. I think at the time I was playing Unreal Tournament at a pretty serious level as well. And yeah, man, that's basically how my life was. Like I was kind of like a skinny fat kid growing up, playing some soccer from time to time. It's very popular in Croatia, but yeah, like, and this is like kind of the stuff. Like I was the person in my town, one of the few, maybe there was like a handful of people that had a computer that could also, burn CDs, that could create music CDs and whatnot. So this is all because of my dad, who made this happen, because he's an engineer and he wanted us to be involved in computers, where most other dads would be like getting their kids to go out on the farm to go do stuff, and my dad was like, this is the future. Like the world is going to look like this when you all grow up. And because of that, I mean, I'm here today and doing things that I'm doing because he was pushing us, me and my brother, into this direction, which now is basically the reason why we're able to do all these things. And yeah, man, a lot of great memories. I'm as equally as unphotogenic as I was back then. So nothing has changed.
I had a computer when I was 5. I think I'm a couple years older than you, and you'd have to access the games through DOS with like a floppy disk.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, of course.
Like CD.
Yeah,
I remember all that stuff. Like we had to learn how to use DOS as little kids if we wanted to play like Wheel of Fortune on floppy disk or whatever it might have been. So
yeah, I had exactly that. Yeah, I had what was that? 2x86. So it's like a very old Intel model. So it's like a very, very old one. So starting from like scratch and eventually getting a Pentium and eventually getting like a better one over time. So yeah, I kind of started again DOS, 311, 95, 98, like from all the like Vistas, Millenniums, like all the Windows that you can think of. Yeah, it's like Windows XP if I'm seeing it correctly on this screen here.
Yeah, I remember. Was it 3.11 was such a big upgrade?
It's huge.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal at that time.
Yeah, it's like you can play. I used to play. Was like Wolfenstein 3D, Duke Nukem back then. There was like some really interesting games.
Doom. Did you play Doom at all?
Yeah, I played all the shooters. So that's kind of like where my passion for shooters started, eventually leading to play Unreal Tournament. Which is it's still, I mean, one of my that's my favorite game of all time, and I'm sad that there's no sequel and nobody's kind of working on that.
It's funny, like what you remember as a kid. Like I still remember all the codes from these games, like the IQD. Like why do I know
the cheat
like,
codes? Yeah.
My wife told me to get something for the fridge, and I can't remember, but I remember the cheat codes from games when I was 5 years old. So, anyways, all right, let's move to the next one here. This is a quote, or it looks like it's a fortune cookie that you had here potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is absolutely true, man. Because if someone told me, and probably you as well, when you were 18, that you're going to be here today doing what you're doing now, how accurate could they have been? I mean, you would have just laughed at them, and you would have said like you're making stuff up, and this is totally outside of the reality that you're able to even conceive. But then when you kind of look backwards at it, and you see the sequence of event that has occurred and how you might have ended up where you're at today, and you kind of see all the like randomness, the luck, the things that have just occurred in combination, and you're here and you're in this blessed position. This is one of those things where people say, well, I'm all like self-made and everything is because of my own effort and work. It's just impossible that is just your own work. I mean, yes, it is work, but it is also like this combination of all the different things and factors, and being born at the right time and being at the right place at the right time and having other people do certain things. So it's just a combination. It's just a blessing when you know that, yes, it is really important to put in hard work, because obviously your effort will put you in places where you can get luckier and you can leverage the opportunities that you have, but it's impossible to know it up front. It's just sort of, you have to run on hope. You work hard, you do all the things you can possibly do, and with enough time, it will work out. It's just, you don't know when it's going to work out or how it's going to work out. But it's kind of, I think having that optimistic, promotion focused mindset is important. Because if you think nothing's going to work out, then you sort of lose out on a lot of opportunities. You don't show up at certain dinners that people invite you, even though it's a pain in the ass to go, and you go there and you meet someone, that person becomes your friend, introduce you to someone else, that person, it's suddenly you get like opportunities that has never existed before. I think people need to take more chances in life and try and like a lot of different things, especially if you're in your 20s. I would have not understood this in my 20s, but in hindsight, I understand it, right?
Yeah, Steve Jobs, I think, says you can only connect the dots looking backwards. I met my wife at a house party in my 20s. Like, what if I didn't go to that house party? It was a very random Saturday night. Buddy says, hey, come by, we're having beers and playing poker. Like, it was not, you never know, right?
It changes your life. And then new life exists because of that. If you have kids, suddenly now new life exists, which their life as well is a consequence of that random event. Same as, our kids now are, is born because of a random event that one night I decided to go out, and one night I decided to be in that same place where this other girl was, which totally makes no sense, but still kind of ended up happening. And now a new generation of life exists because of that, and it didn't exist before, and it would not have existed in that particular way if that wasn't the case. So it's incredible. And same as we exist.
And you can trace it back really far. Like I tried tracing it back even further, and I went to that school because there was a bad real estate event in Canada that made my parents move. Just like, you can trace it back really far and just see the level of randomness that actually exists, and it's
incredible, man. Yeah, it's absolutely, very, very humbling. Like, it's just incredible how many things have had to happen for us to be here. That's the beauty of life, man.
All right, I'm going to end today with a fun question, something I think about with you often. Something you're awesome at doing is telling people to hit the like button. All your videos. I'm horrible at doing this. Tell me about the first time you did that, and what you think is one of the most creative ways you've done it.
Oh man, I don't remember when I did it the first time, but it was just like a random idea. I think I saw someone else do it on YouTube in a very interesting way. I think it was Graham Stephan or one of the other guys who was just saying like, oh, hit the like button. And he was just like doing it more like hit the like button for the algorithm or something like that. It would make clever ways of kind of, and I was thinking, can I make this a part of the video somehow? Like, and one of my favorite ways of doing it would be, if you're hungry, hit the like button to be less hungry. Or if you want to build more muscle, hit the like button. And it's kind of half true. Like, if you hit the like button, you see more of my videos, you will ultimately get in better shape. So there's some truth to that. It's not going to be the defining factor, but I'm sure that it's going to make a difference. And it's just something that I found very interesting now it makes the process of making the video more fun for me. And anything I can do to make the process of making videos more fun means I can make more videos and enjoy it. And I think that's sort of something that just kind of naturally came about. I don't really have a great explanation for it. It didn't come up as like a strategy for like, I'm just going to boost my views. It was more like,
it wasn't an inverting strategy of how do I get more from the algorithm type of thing. It was more.
No, I don't think it makes any difference, actually. Yeah, I don't think it makes any difference. Like, I really don't think it makes any difference because like I had videos where I don't do anything. It makes no difference. I don't think YouTube really looks at how many people hit the like button. I think that's not as important because the like button, maybe it's a small signal. And probably, if anything, subscribe button is more of a valuable metric for them. If who hits subscribe based on
subscribes there. I did it for the first time. Hit subscribe.
Exactly. It's like hit the subscribe. So subscribe is way more important. Like is not as important. Comment might be more important than the like. So I think like is kind of on the low end of the importance, but it's just it's a clever little thing that you can do to engage people as well. Because people, I would imagine, sometimes watching my videos just out of while they're eating or in their pockets, so it kind of just breaks the monotony of the video as well.
It's probably not the best time to do it 95 minutes into a podcast. That's probably not optimal, but
I would also agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. But podcasts are a little bit of a unique format. I like podcasts. I think most of the content I consume these days, if it's not books, it is podcasts. I very rarely watch short videos. I mean, there's some specific things that I want to learn about, and it's a short video. I appreciate that. But a lot of the content that I consume tends to be podcasts. Just the way I tend to consume content is more so when I'm walking or when I'm doing other things. So I'm not like sitting and watching, unless it's like anime, right? Anime, I'll just sit and watch, but that's not really content. That's just me having fun.
I just listen to podcasts in the background while I'm working, and then I'll tune in and tune out depending on how interesting the piece of information is or the topic.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. Man. Awesome.
Okay. Anyways, Mario, thanks so much for your time. Where can everyone find you?
Appreciate it. Yeah. So the easiest way is just to find my YouTube channel. So if you just look for my name, so Mario Tomic, you'll find a lot of videos. Hopefully you resonate with a bunch of them and you get a lot of value out of them. So that's sort of the goal of the channel. And yeah, man, I appreciate you being here. As I said before we started recording, like this is one of my favorite interactions because you do a really good job at interviewing people and asking the right questions, as well as just making it more of a kind of an unpredictable style of podcast where it's not always the same sort of stuff. So we kind of go into a lot of different fields, which I think fitness industry is sort of missing in a way, like a podcast like this. So I definitely appreciate your work as well. And thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, man. Take care.
All right, cheers.